Welcome to Fjordur, a beautiful Nordic landmass and home to many modded monstrosities, old and new ones. My name is ARK and I have 100 days to take down the mini-bosses, 3 guardians, and lastly the big bad wolf Fenrir Sulfur. On top of that, to spice it up a bit, I can tame nothing but mammals. Will I be able to succeed or not? Only one way to find out, so let's jump into it. I started this adventure at the Vardiland north section of this frozen ark, and picked up some sticks and stones, as well as showing this tree here whose boss used these materials to make a stone pick. Wanted to take a closer look at this dead shark, but noticed how a Midgard moray was eating it, so I simply hit some stones for flint, made a torch and a hatchet, grabbed some fiber to make spears, but yeah, a torch early on is essential on this map, thanks to these low temperatures. I also gave these dodos some headshots in exchange for meat. I walked across the coastlines in order to reach the grasslands a bit further up for some hopefully early and easy Andrewsarchus taming, but decided to stay here for a while considering the time of day as well as the drop in temperature. Gathered the essentials for campfire to cook my meat and constructed a small beach bob 1 foundation thatch hut to keep me safe and warm. Now natural causes would be very proud of me, by the way. Some simple armor was crafted as well, and as the sun settled on our first day, I just admired the stunning visuals of this gorgeous land. And I can hear you all in the comments. I know I have been gone for a bit longer than originally anticipated. But that's beside the point. I am trying to give you some more of these 100 days videos in the future. In the early morning I ventured out to hunt some more dodos for their hide, which I used to craft a bit, just in case if the cold air kills me. Which is funny, usually I feel like dying whenever it's summer and I'm more of a winter enjoyer, but anyway. I made my way up to the small grasslands where the hippo dogs should spawn. I deprived this boulder of all its precious honey since I need this for taming an Andrew. I did found a good amount of them, but they were either in bad areas or accompanied by large turtle-like beasts. I did settle for one eventually. Taming them is rather simple. Throw honey on the floor, let them eat it, and jump on their backs. Now just rodeo, ride them, and use the A or D keys depending on the direction they turn. I did have to watch out for this red bar that filled up, but it was a low level nonetheless, so she was tamed very quickly. I named her Wendy. Andrews are just amazing. They can charge through stones and are quite strong even at a low level. I came across the shipwreck and just broke all of these barrels open. They had some scrap metal and metal tools inside, so it was a good step forward. Also, Wendy was able to harvest fiber like a champ. I got rid of my hut and made it a bit bigger. Made a modern pestle, reached level 20 and collected all needed resources for a forge. To smelt all the scrap metal. And after saving these turtles from drowning, I had enough things for a smithy and metal pick. On day 3 I wanted some crystal to make an awesome spyglass. On the way there I kicked a peg into the stratosphere, found some crystal nodes and cleared all of them. I could now make the awesome spyglass, which allows me to see the outlines of creatures, their stats, taming food, etc. Back in the grassland, I found a max level Andrewsarchus.
Lord have mercy. We must stay focused, brothers. We must stay focused.
Knowing me, I just had to tame this lady. So I smacked some honey on the floor, mounted her, and took her for a wild ride. Taming her with only, well, 1 piece of honey. Perhaps the taming is a bit too high. She already hit a lot harder than Wendy. At base, I made a crossbow, gathered more resources and crafted a primitive Andrewsarchus saddle, which only gives it some base armor and no minigun blessed war machine. I picked up my first rune, which acts like an explorer node. They give a huge XP boost for like 600 seconds. I managed to scale this mountain and reach the snowy peak. There I killed some mammoths for the pelt, which I need for fur armor, to compete with this harsh environment. But I love Andrews. These guys got some serious jumping power. Back home I was able to make 3 pieces of fur gear, which should be enough for now. I also collected some narco berries and rotted some flesh for narcotic, which I could use to tame a mammoth later on. On the next morning I got into a sticky situation with this pelagic crocodile, but managed to escape nonetheless. For the rest of the day I was looking for either a partner for my Andrew, a mammoth, or some kind of other utility creature really. I did stumble upon these echolots, which would have been a really good early mount. I might come back to them later. Anyway, I had my essential little brawl here and there, but other than that, it was a really nice calm day. I found this village, which had some crops up for grabs. However, an Volcano blocked one of my ways out, so I chose a different path. And I love Andrews for traveling. Did I mention it already? And of course I got utterly disappointed by this loot drop. Day 6, the same thing occurred again. I was looking for a mammoth, didn't find any good levels, skinned some wolves for their pelt, and that's kinda it. Now I did cross path with an Emilan Toka, and that's my sign to turn around and leave. Other than that, this day was very simple and planned. The next morning, I actually prepared to tame a mammoth, and I did spot it a 168. So I yabba dabba dooed down this cliff, got rid of its weak partner and the nearby aggro, and started to knock him out. But this is ARK and I haven't played it in a while, so of course I couldn't have nice things, because this guy got eaten by some Argies and Carnos. So I kept my eyes peeled for more high levels, just couldn't find any. Instead I looked for a better berry harvester. Andrews are good and all, but I need something that focuses on berries instead of fiber. And I found something, so I gathered stone and wood. To make a simple trap, trapped the stego and knocked him out. And gathered more berries while this fella was sleeping. But halfway through this damn day I realized that I have the brain of a jellyfish. Guys, this is a mammal only run. Stegos are dinosaurs. So I killed it and proceeded to craft more trank arrows. Now I did find this 174 Atlas giraffe. This lengthy, long-necked mammal would be a really good berry harvester. So I lured him down to the beach, placed the trap and lured him in. Now time to do the same thing once again. I finally knocked him out on day 9 and let him starve for a while. In the meantime, some obsidian was collected and I tamed this little pampas cat that I dubbed Kitty Cat Lapur. I also made a pair of scissors and gave myself a much needed haircut. And used said hair to make fur boots. Also gave the giraffe the veggies I collected earlier. Letting him starve was a good idea. It was almost tamed. Whilst waiting for that, I simply gathered wood, flint, stone and metal. Gerald, the giraffe, was finally tamed, and just as I predicted, he is a lot better at gathering lots of berries. We collected lots and lots of berries, later on got back to the little farm to borrow more veggies, but then thought, hey, how about I throw hands with this Volcano? And with throwing hands I mean shooting him from a distance while he tried to eat a corpse. And luring him to the beach where I tried to drown him. Well, that didn't really work out as I hoped. But I was able to bite him in the water where he didn't fought back much, because apparently water boxed him out. Using this method I was able to drain his 31k health and looted his dead body. In the morning of day 11 I was patrolling the grasslands for a high-level male Andrew, but nothing was found. Well, I did get jumped by some small fellas, and I gotta say, some lions would be really nice. I also defended myself against the Rex. I mean, he attacked me first after all. After some trank arrows were made, I went back to the farm once again to steal all the crops, and then used the realm teleport by holding R to get to Asgard. This beautiful realm of the gods is covered by golden grass, high mountains and colorful forests. Upon entering this realm, I immediately saw a level 174 mammoth. You know, the main reason why I went over here. But I decided to not tame this one and explore this place a bit because, I don't know. I did find some Maywings, which would be a definite needed tame. Actually, they're not mammals, they're flying platypus. Fuck you. They produce milk and are hairy. That's mammal enough in my book. Anyway, the whole day was spent running across these Eden fields and looking for mammoths. Maywings or Andrews. And I did found a good max level mammoth later on. So I gently divorced these two, placed a simple trap with the structures I brought with me, but he didn't want it to walk in, or rather, he couldn't fit. Nobody calls me dummy! Well, I guess this is what happens when you take a break from ARK 100 Days for almost a year. He was kinda just attacking the trap out of frustration, so I took advantage of that, and after a lot of arrows had been fired, he fell asleep at the edge of this cliff. I just let him starve for a little while, placed some spike walls around him just to be safe. Meanwhile, I kept exploring Asgard a bit more, and encountered my favorite creature in all of ARK. Anywho, I did stumble upon this low-level Maywing and managed to knock it out after jumping back and forth. He was named Zoom. I gave the sleeping big fella some food and he tamed up to 50%. I really like the starved taming method on herbivores. I also checked out this little village over here, which, in my opinion at least, is one of the best spots on this entire map. Oh, and I helped out these Ankies to kill this Alpha Raptor. He gave me some runes and a better hatchet. Shortly after, however, I did fought a second Alpha Raptor, and this one gave me a Mastercraft metal hatchet. I goofed around here and there whilst waiting for the mammoth to wake up, and once he was my friend, I named him Fred. And back we go to Vardiland. I thought the normal realm in the Nordic mythology was called Midgard. Anyway. Back home I gave the new fellas their saddles and gathered some wood and berries with Fred. Zoom, on the other hand, was just fast. Which would allow me to traverse this land a lot quicker, especially if we consider that the only other flyers I would tame would be either the Flying Fisherman or the Desmodus. I gathered some metal and oil from the small island, but till this day I'm baffled for how long these gliders can stay in the air. At the end, I smelted the metal, made narcotic and some ammo. The next day I remembered how time-consuming narcoberry farming can be if you don't have a stego or Bronto. I made more narcotic, ammo for my crossbow, and a water jar. Stole some more veggies cause A, it's for real estate, and then flew over the land and sea to look for potential tames. I did found this flag blueprint and found some really strong monsters. Sadly, these aren't mammals. I also came across multiple Yakko herds, and I gotta say, having some of these carnage cows would be really nice, but they were all trash level. I found this high level doedicurus, but of course he was badly injured, so knocking him out with a crossbow was no option. I ended up crafting this flak helmet and went over to the volcano for the first time. Whilst gliding over bubbling magma and burning brimstone, I did find a high-level male doedicurus, but I was looking for better ones. Also killed these glacier king crabs for organic polymer. I gotta say though, if I could make an exception on this run, it would be for these crustaceans, because they can harvest minerals. Then we tried to kill this alpha tigerfish, but left because there was too much going on here. I made some ghillie gear for the volcano. Back there I lured the high-level bowling ball away from the sulfur fields and up this ramp. Here I proceeded to knock him out and let him starve. For the majority of day 16 I simply spent my time waiting for the doed to be tamed, and once he got the name Chaotic. Back at the frozen shores I did start taming these two high-level walrus, mainly because these strongest can harvest silica pearls. And on top of that I placed a trap for this leopard seal and lured her in with honey, which worked surprisingly well. Now these are also passive tames, but a bit harder cause even with the ghillie they can see and attack you. And well, after the first feed, this happened to me. I rushed back to my corpse, Miss Lepore was still okay, and I managed to get my stuff back. The two walrus were tamed as well. The male was named Walter for some reason, and on the leopard seal I just had to play careful. I even placed a sleeping bag just to be safe. Whilst waiting on her to get hungry, I looked around for a bit. Found some high-level orcas, juveniles at that, but I wasn't the right level to tame them yet. But it took ages for her to get hungry, so I went back to base and placed a feeding trough, as well as a preserving bin, made Chaotic a saddle, and performed some roly-polies to gather stone. The seal was finally hungry again later on, and I slipped in, slipped out, gave her my meat, tamed her up, and named her Lilith. She did more damage to Karukus and also gathered some decent polymer from them. Oh, and I got this dire bear saddle blueprint from a drop. On day 18, on top of snowy peaks, I found this unit of a Daedon, but I had to lure its friends away. However, this Polovia had other ideas. I managed to survive and jump on Zoom to get out of the scenario. I quickly flew back home to repair my broken armor and went back to the piggy. Placed a simple trap, lured her in, and gave her some headshots. But the Daedon takes ages to tame up with prime meat, so in the meantime I grappled to this insane red drop. Just look at these items! Trying to keep the dangerous stuff away from this lady turned out to be rather easy, but a bit annoying. She was finally tamed, so I brought her back to my place. I tamed her this early on because I know I'll need her sooner or later, either for healing my mounts or for taming a specific vampiric flyer. Speaking of that, I did start sucking my own blood, but this process really hurts, so I made a cooking pot and was in a seamless endless cycle of removing my blood, cooking health potions and consuming those. After I had enough blood bags, Zoom and I headed over to this cave in order to tame a Desmodus Draculae. Rather simple tame really, they have to grab you and steal the blood bags. I do not care for the level as of right now, I only wanted to tame one, but managed to lure down both and in a little panic tamed both as well. I named the higher level one Veggie and the lower one Kiki. But I wasn't the right level to make this saddle yet, so yeah. Also, Lilith did not only deal more damage to penguins, but also fish, as well as being able to grab raptors and drag them into the ocean. Plus, she gave me insulation, which is just nice to have on this map. We did explore the ocean a little bit and tried to look for a partner for Lilith without any success. I gathered a bunch of berries with Gerald for narcotic, killed this Bronto with my walrus, and these guys have a very lovely tusk slam attack which inflicts bleeding. And after that, I finally reached the right level to craft the saddle for these bats. Desmodus are really nimble flyers and are capable of collecting blood bags by attacking creatures, which was the main reason why I wanted to get a lower level one first. They also had this nice feature to land on any surface to regenerate stamina. Anyway, Veggie and I drank a bunch of blood, although the Midnight Skyer wasn't even red. You got that reference? You get a cookie. I explored the map a bit more, flew across the snowy peaks to find, well, potential ground mounts, but stumbled upon this cave instead. Now, Desmodus by default can fly in caves in general, and this one was very gorgeous, with a dwarven-esque theme to it, and a huge mine, and even a gloomy aberration-themed cavern. But there was nothing worth of value, so I left. We did find this river dweller in Ogopogo, and near the shores battles between leviathans occurred, but I couldn't tame any of them yet, that is. Besides crafting some tranks, we then teleported to the second realm, Vanaheim. A lush tropical forest covers this entire place. On day 22, we were still flying through this realm in the hopes of finding something good for caves later on. I spent the whole day looking for some good tames, but nothing piqued my interest, so we went back to Vardiland. There in the redwoods, however, I did find a really good Atlas tiger. These powerful and vicious felines are a perfect mount for caves. I cleared out this area, placed a trap and lured this feline in. After giving her constant face and back shots, she fell asleep. I used some blood to make a sanguine elixir and looked around for orbis. Well, I found an Atlas Hydra close by and just killed this brekkie for easy prime meat. I brought it back to the tiger and used the elixir to gain 30% taming. Not that much later, and not that far away either, I did find a high-level male tiger, so let's do it all over again. Well, my crossbow broke, so I had to gather all the stuff for a forge, then a smithy, and once crafted, I could repair my crossbow. That's why you bring spare ones each time. After another barrage of arrows, he was tamed as well. And both of these cats came out with pretty good stats, not gonna lie. And we flew across the land to make it back home. And I got this stuff from a drop. I gathered the needed ingredients to make a fabricator, which I had to place on my roof. I found and saved this Orbis, I'll never get back to it, and spent some time looking for potential base locations. I was interested in the stronghold, but everyone is always building there, so nah. I did found a high-level pangolin rhinoceros. These beefy, armored, one-horned plant eaters would be a perfect metal harvester later down the line. Anyway, I also borrowed some paste from the beavers. They were fine with that. Back home, I did cut my hair once again and proceeded to transfer and split all my needed items onto my beds. Made some soul balls, as well as a gun to pick up all my other creatures, picked up the fabricator, and slowly made my way to a new base spot. Flying through the dark night with two highly encumbered beds was relaxing, to say the least, and we made it to the spot, these two small islands, near the volcano, which would provide me with good protection since the only threats would be dialos and seagulls. I threw out some of my tames, placed the essentials down, and derooted some trees with thread. And before I forget, I placed down a hitching post, a soul terminal, and told my tigers to have some fun. The terminal would pick up the babies, as long as it has soul balls. And from there till day 27, I just built my house. And sometimes lost my sanity over these snap points. But I think it turned out pretty well. A simple, rustic, wooden house. Perfect for the Viking theme. I moved the forges, smithy and fabricator inside, as well as my needed bed and some boxes. I also made a bookshelf to storage my blueprints. I then picked up some of the leftovers from my thatch base. And hey, you see this? A bit of long neck rifle. Oh well, back to my crate hopping, I guess. I just really want a bit of long neck, like, come on game. I stole some veggies and grabbed some metal, which I used to make an upgrade station as well as a Viking forge. I'm not allowed to upgrade my gear at this point though. In the Viking forge, however, I made this little obby skin, as looking skins for my weapons and armor. Yep, this looks way better. The obby skin, however, made some rather annoying noises. Also, if you end up enjoying this video at any point, consider to like and subscribe, it really does help out. I got this Mastercraft Maywing saddle I'll never use, and started to build my greenhouse. Well, at least the crops and pipes so far. Now greenhouse is complete with a dung beetle and piggy, though I could only tame the latter, and that I did. She was named Poopy. After feeding the piggy and seeding the crops, I was in dire need of crystal, so I headed onto the highly placed grasslands to tame one of those pangolin rhinos. Trapping him didn't work, and he gave Veggie a few uppercuts, but with the power of flight and bugs, we managed to knock him out for good. And this Bronto had to get removed for his sweet blood. While this one-horned fella was munching away on them veggies, I looked around the area for a bit and found an entrance to a cave. The Aberration Cave, to be more specific. Besides the aberrant residence, there was also this loot crate with Ascendant Flag gauntlets inside, so I got rid of the Ravengers and grabbed the loot. Oh, and I found the Megapithecus terminal as well. Once the rhino was at 70% taming, I used the elixir to fully tame it. I named him Moxie, and he was just amazing, capable of harvesting good amount of flint, whilst being fast, strong, and proved to be a really good metal harvester as well. On day 31 I got a male and female tiger with a good stats, so I made a S+ nanny and a generator. However, I noticed that I have 100% wind in my area, so I wanted to make a wind turbine, but I needed more pearls for electronics, so Walter and I headed into the sea and gathered some. Crafted the turbine, placed it outside, and it powered the nanny. So she could take care of the tigers, but I did pick them up with a zoom to nurture them. In the meantime, I flew back to this small island to strip it clean of all the metal and oil. Back home, the metal was put in the forges, and the tigers were fully matured, so I told them to have fun and healed them up as well. Then we headed to the volcano and gathered a bit of oil in the oil fields, and lastly took one of the newborn tigers and named him Shere Khan. He was fully grown the next morning and I used some of his brethren to level him up a bit. And these tigers are just beautiful, able to perform a lovely bleed with a claw swipe as well as a pounce attack, which rips and tears smaller creatures to bits. And that's what we did, just doing a little meat run. After that I jumped back on Veggie and we flew around, came across castles and whatnot, and even the Patreon cave. And of course, took the beaver's belongings, because I need them more than they do. And I used the paste to make a beer barrel. I mainly wanted beer to hopefully tame some elephants later on. The next morning I tried to pull these Atlas drakes as well as these beds away from this cave, instead of doing this at night and just going invisible. So I harvested some metal instead, as well as some crystal. Now I did find this Volcano I urged to kill, but not before I bring all this metal home, as well as gathering some needed resources on my island. And I crafted the harpoon launcher, net projectiles and trank ammo, as well as some stone gates. But I really wanted and or needed a better long neck to ease taming even more, but I couldn't find any. So instead, flew into this cave finally, no loot crate in sight, but at least the artifact of the immune, which I could grab once all the cave inhabitants were gone. I picked up my Daedon and flew all over to the cave where we tamed the other Desmodus. And there was a 168 as well as a 156, so I lured this much lower level one out and away from the cave. Now the pig had to hold some blood bags and then getting picked up by the bats. This way you increase the taming effectiveness of these fellas. Daedons are just a good choice cause they can heal if necessary. I just had to rinse and repeat this over and over again, but at one point I got picked up as well and fell down. So I rushed back to the cave and luckily everyone was still okay, so I continued. Now you must make sure the Daedon is moving around, otherwise the Desmodus only attacks it. Of course, Aeonic had to get involved, so I got rid of it.
I don't want peace. I want problems, always!
And of course, I got disconnected from the server. Back in, everything was fine. The bat was just chilling at the ceiling and she was at 98 taming effectiveness. So from here on out, all I had to do was to get picked up and let her drink my blood. Now I just had to do the same thing again for the 156 male. So if you excuse me, I needed some more blood. Luckily, the Shonisaurus was willing to donate some. I did gather the needed things for a sleeping bag, and getting this lad's taming effectiveness up took pretty much all day. But at last he was tamed after he picked me up twice. Once home, they produced some offspring. I crafted a needed fridge and continued with the construction of my greenhouse. Once I came back from work, the bats made a good male and female, and I took care of some unworthy babies to reach level 80 for the industrial forge. But I was short on some materials, the good bats were fully grown, and of course we went on a nice little metal and crystal run. Filled to the brim with resources, we slowly made our way back home and stored it all away. This little perfect lady was named Velvet, by the way.
You've got it twisted.
And I finished the greenhouse. Seeded some of the crops, but tried to collect the missing seeds as well. Velvet fully matured and she was already faster, but mainly stronger than the non-imprinted bats. Tearing whole lion packs apart was easy. I also took the last seeds I couldn't get from the farm once again, and I found this 180 male Daedon, so I picked him up and brought him all the way to my island. There I proceeded to knock him out. Whilst he was snoozing and doozing, Lilith and I killed a bunch of penguins for the polymer, and the male Daedon ended up taming and I showed him his new wife. The next day I wanted to tame that Ogopogo I saw a couple days ago, so I made sure he was a mammal and headed over there, but I wasn't the right level to tame him, so I skedaddled away. To level up, I picked up this rune and engaged combat with this Volcano, which I took down easily. And hey, a better pick and crossbow, so that's a win. While the XP boost was still there, I killed this other Kano near the castle as well. And for the rest of this day we flew from drop to drop in the hopes we get a better rifle, but we got utterly disappointed. Even by this red drop. What the hell am I supposed to do with this Lance blueprint, guys?
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man.
Anyway, a good stat female piggy was born as well as a Desmodus with a damage mutation. Finally managed to craft the industrial forge and build a small platform outside my house to place it on. Originally I wanted to make it look fancy with the double door frames, but that looked stupid, so I placed railings instead. The breeding area was moved as well. An industrial grill was crafted and placed to make some good bloody food. And I made some scuba gear, which would allow me to go on some meat runs in the middle of the ocean. I had enough stuff to make a domesticated beehive, and after grabbing my weekly supply of paste from the local beavers, placed the hive in my base. The search for good loot continued. However, I found this max level sloth with horrible stats.
Brother,
So I looked for better ones, but I had to settle for this one, because I couldn't find any. So I pinned her down, placed the trap around her, and knocked her out. I flew around the area while she was sleeping, killed this Volcano, which gave me some better than primitive crossbows. The Megatherium turned out with decent-ish stats, but honestly, it could have been better. On day 41, Miss Lapour received some actual armor. I made 2 sap tabs and headed to the redwood. But before that I checked out the aberration cave again for loot and gathered some red gems as well. Who knows, I might need them. Whilst flying near the cliffs and plateaus, I did came across this low-level Carcharodontosaurus. He had such low health because he was one from Shad's Critter Reworks. So I killed him for the Giga Heart, which I would need for the Dragon Boss later on. At the redwood, I placed the sap tabs at a random tree low to the ground. I could just grab the sap with the S+ pulling system. For the rest of this day, I flew across the redwood to find a potential partner for my Megatherium, but I couldn't find any. Some trank arrows were crafted and I got this really nice sword from a drop on the volcano. A bit later on, I killed a alpha raptor as well as an Volcano because they kinda deserved it, but didn't give me anything good. And I also tamed these 2 high-level acrophycetus that were close to my island. They were pretty cute and fast, but the damage output of these guys could have been a bit better. Besides that, I got a good stat male Daedon. All my creatures waiting too much and too fast, so I went on another meat run on the mainland, as well as collecting some apex drops and metal here and there. And once again in the aberration cave, dealing with these dogs, but at least I got this Ascendant pump action shotgun. The wild piggy pair was replaced with a good stat ones. Some more silica pearls were needed for electronics so I could make the chemistry bench. Some much better ghillie gear had been acquired by this drop, and I flew all over this damn place to look for more good loot. But of course, nothing. So I picked up a little bit of sap and tabs and stole some Deinonychus eggs to cook extraordinary kibble, but I never did that. Anyway, I named this old bugger John for no reason, and the chemistry bench had been made and placed as well, making essentially anything won't be a problem anymore. Back on the mainland, and I think I was looking for either Megatheriums or Ovis. I can't remember. Well, I did found this max level Fenrir, which can spawn thanks to the Critter Rework mod, but I ignored it and continued my search. And there it was, a Mastercraft long neck rifle blueprint.
God, it's beautiful.
So I patiently waited for it to land and crafted it once I was home. I spent the entire morning of the next day looking for, you guessed it, another Megatherium. Did I find one, you may ask?
Ha! No.
So I flew inside of this temple at least, dealt with some fellas and proceeded to go further. And a bit further down the cave, after grabbing trash loot, I got the artifact of the hunter. Made it outside and kept on looking for a sloth, but of course, nothing. Oh, and we grabbed some berries from the mainland to feed my creatures. Different types of rifle ammunition was made, and flying over to the sulfur fields to gather some condensed gas, which I could turn into gas balls in order to make a hazard suit. And of course, whilst we were at the volcano, I collected some metal as well. Got this nice saddle for a sloth and used some metal to make metal gates. But more metal was needed, so I went back to the mountain and cleansed it of all its precious minerals. Once we got back home, some necessary materials were in the works, and I made Poopy feel like she just came back from Taco Bell. What can I say? Fertilizer is needed. On day 47, I grabbed all my taming equipment and headed over to the swamp. Now, the swamp is just a small spawn cluster of animals on this map, really. But there I found many bunyips. Mighty, massive and powerful piles of land blubber. These majestic, monstrous murder seals are simply powerful, even by cryptid standards. This high-level male had really good stats, so I lured him out of the swamp and over to the mainland. There I trapped him and rained a barrage of darts and arrows upon his large body. He took a deep nap afterwards. I noticed that his torpor dropped pretty fast, so I flew back home, made more trank ammo and narcotic as well, and the greenhouse was expanded a bit to increase narcoberry production. Whilst heading back to the lad, I did found these 2 Zygophycetus. These prehistoric whales are pack monsters and having some of them would be useful. So I will come back for them later. Back at the bunyip, I pushed some narcotic into his gullet and then simply waited for him to tame up. And the stats? Oh boy, those are some godly stats. The next day I prepared well enough to tame a female bunyip. So back to the swamp we go. After some looking around, I settled for this lady with this insane health stat. I used this Phiomia to lure her onto the mainland, and knocking out went exactly like with the male. She took a nice little nap on the beach. Meanwhile, I flew around the mountains and even back to the hunter cave just to grab this trash loot. Well, I did get back to the spot where I saw the Zygos, but they both disappeared, like me whenever I upload a 100 days video. Anyway, back to the lady bunyip, I simply waited again, kicked up my feet and used the sanguine elixir once her taming was high enough. Back at base, I immediately told these 2 to get down to business. A baby bunyip was born with the required stats. I got this ascendant pistol and then gathered some of these blue gems, which I used to make a full set of hazard gear. And with my Megatherium in my pocket, we flew over to the swamp once more and entered the toxic swamp cave. we simply plowed straight through groups of snakes and insects alike to reach and obtain the brutish artifact, then made our way out of the cave and back home. After asking this dialogue to leave my property, I proceeded to upgrade my fur chest piece by using the upgrade station, but I knew I would need more insulation, so I kept my eyes peeled for others in the redwoods, and found this high level one. So I dragged a dead fish to her once or twice, and she was tamed. Anyway, I tamed this otter cause they keep you warm, and you can increase that by leveling up their damage. Later on, I had to go on yet another meat run, since my creatures are more hungry than a devil joe. In the early morning of this day, I crafted the industrial cooker, and then had some fun connecting it with the pipes of my greenhouse. I made some sweet veggie cakes and headed over to Asgard to search for some others. There I got greeted by some raptors, of course. They jump at me! They jump at me! And after flying through this gorgeous realm for the majority of this day, I found and tamed 4 others. Back in the normal realm, I built a small pen for the sheep and gave them all a fresh cut. A stat male bunyip was born and the otter got a nice sense of fashion. She looks like she's about to fight some wyverns. For the most part though, I just collected some apex drops, like Spinosaurs, Rex Arms and Megalania Toxin. I'll need them anyway sooner or later, and the good stat bunyips had some fun later on. After another whole real day, I got surprised by a health and damage mutation on the bunyips, so I let them grow up. Also got this fella which I named Behemoth, and this lady which I named after a random person who wrote a comment under my last 100 days. I expanded the breeding area for later uses, and on my way to the Aberration Cave I found this lovely spot. I recall my friend Crow made a build here once in one of his 100 days. Some mediocre loot was obtained from the Aberrant Cave once more, and back in the Redwoods I tamed this Maywing to help raise more babies. She was named Ceres. She just picked up some of the bunyips. Behemoth was fully grown and he was an absolute beast. Insanely high damage output already, could perform a powerful stomp attack, a lovely tail slam and claw swipes. These things are just tanks, also immune to jellyfish stings, and overall just amazing. The only bad thing about them is their stamina. In the midst of the night and on low health, we managed to kill this alpha megalodon. Also, I mainly kill alphas because of these rune stones, which are needed for later purposes. All the bunyips fully matured and I simply put them away in another soul terminal. This way they'd gain XP and won't devour all the food in the trough. Speaking of trough, I needed raw meat. So we got back to the sea again and killed most of the bigger fish in there, as well as some aloes and RGs on the volcano for the brains and talons. And I simply continued with the meat run for the rest of this day, running from A to B and just clearing out the spawns again. Again, I needed food for my creatures. I finally crafted some shotgun ammo for the Ascendant one I found, as well as some beer jars. A riot shield was crafted and I headed over to the place where I saw a bunch of Dinotheriums. True mammalian titans, capable of giving even some of the tougher carnivores a run for the money with their bellowing roars and powerful stomps. I found this level 174, so I had to get rid of the rest. Then, however, I realized I wasn't the right level to even tame one yet. So I flew home, and with my disappointment, I cleared out the soul terminal to gain XP. So of course I tried to level up in other ways, such as fighting this Alpha Rex without an XP boost, because I'm a smooth brain. The T-Rex was almost able to enrage Behemoth, but only almost. At least I got a cool trophy from it, and besides all that, I grabbed some scuba stuff and swam over to the other side of the map. There, within the freezing cold water, we entered this underwater cave, had no time going through it, and obtained the artifact of the Devourer. On day 58, I picked up some of the runestones and flew across the horizon over to Baylor's cave. One of the 3 mini-bosses on Fjordur. The queen of all beasts, poisonous and toxic like nothing else. We found a cave entrance and carefully made our way down. In the main room, I had to kill some critters. Once cleared, I threw out Behemoth, went to the terminal and summoned the Bee Queen. And her fight was just land. Yep, land. All we did was just biting, claw slams, tail slams, and throwing Behemoth's weight around. Baylor is the easiest of the 3 mini-bosses and has like the same amount of health as a max level Alpha Rex and the damage of an aloe. The main threat was her poison gas, which could knock us out. Hence why I had hazard gear on. After a ton of button smashing, we killed her and got some nice rewards, including 30 elements and of course the Baylor relic. The next morning I got surprised by the second health and damage mutation on the bunyips. They were both males, so I had to get another stat female out of the soul terminal. I crafted some needed grappling hooks and flew over to the redwood cave. There I jumped on my sloth and we carefully made it down the pathway, past these high level bears, and simply overpowered all the bugs and insects alike with the sheer power of the Megatherium. Thanks to this insect killer buff, no creepy crawlies stood a chance. I did have to fight these stylers, who blocked my way. Once they were gone, I grappled up this part, soulballed my slothy friend, and made it into the artifact room. There I grabbed the artifact of the strong, removed this crate, and back in the Thyla room I noticed there was a crate with a Massacraft fur cap inside. So I had to take it, of course. We made our way outside afterwards and flew home to place the artifact. Day 60 and we went back to the Dinotherium we tried to tame earlier, but she was nowhere to be found. Just great. Finally reached the right level, but the elephant I wanted was gone. But closer towards my base, however, I found this max level one. So I had to kill all of his friends and proceeded to tame it. I do have a full guide on my channel about these guys. If you want to check that out, feel free to do. But taming these is rather easy. I placed the beer on my last hotbar slot and approached this mighty fella. I then had to look out for his face and beware of his expressions. Head shake and wiggle ears are 2 of the 3 good signs, so I got closer, raised my shield to be safe, and he drank the beer. I did this 3 more times and he only gave me the good signs. Perhaps he was happier without his friends or something. Back home, the sheeps had some fun, and I went back to my typical metal spot. 2 overs were born, as well as some more bunyips. Some of you might already know why I bred overs. I made a chainsaw, killed the 2 new overs, and harvested a huge amount of pelt from the dead bodies. In the early hours of day 61, I upgraded some of my fur gear a bit, and then threw out all the bunyips I raised up earlier. These fellas gained a huge amount of XP during their time in the terminal, so I leveled them all up of course, and started to heal them up as well. But again, food was needed, so Behemoth and I headed into the sea, but got distracted by this cave entrance. And once inside, we took down some cave dwellers and ended up in this beautiful grotto. I thought it was just some nice spot. I had no idea there was an artifact further down. Anyway, once back outside in the ocean, I wanted to kill some more of the bigger water creatures for the succulent flesh. But I only came across this alpha too, so he was really high up. That borked him out, and he went from an actual threat to easy XP and 2 tentacles. I also finished healing the majority of my bunyips. Some of the newer bunyips weren't as lucky with the passive terminal XP, so I had to level them up manually by, well, using their own kin as fuel. The entire process of throwing out baby bunyips, unclaiming them and getting rid of them took over half the day. And again, I had to heal them all up. At one point though, I did put them back in the soul balls so that they won't clear out my feeding trough within 2 nanominutes. So then Behemoth and I ran across the land, killed some trophy givers, and took some of the beaver's taxes. And with taxes, I mean paste. Traveling with the bunyip is pretty relaxing, to be honest. They may not have the best stamina, but that's what makes it so relaxing. We eventually made it to my favorite metal place, and once more we cleared this whole mountain. On the way home, we did stomp the ever-living crap out of this Rex, because I don't know. I upgraded my fur gear once more and finally reached over 1000 hypothermal insulation. I made some ammo, fryer curry and even healing potions. Picked up some of my more needed creatures, including the Dinotherium. You might wonder, why did I prepare myself so well? We're heading to Jotunheim for the very first time. A harsh and very unforgiving place, covered in ice and snow. If the cold won't consume you, the creatures sure will. Well, at first we simply took to the skies and kept on exploring this realm, mainly because we were looking for a very specific place, and after flying over frozen lakes and rigid mountain tips, we finally found it, the entrance to Steinbjörn's cave. The most powerful of the 3 mini-bosses, a massive bear covered in boulders and ice, a true monster of the Arctic. We slowly flew towards the terminal room, I surrounded the terminal with my bunyips, John received some fresh feed, and the Dinotherium was chilling in the corner. I got to the terminal and summoned the stone bear. I just let my bunyips deal with them and got an attack boost in with the elephant, grabbed John and simply hovered above this fight with a piggy on passive healing. And besides that, my bunyips just went ham on him. There was not much I could have done besides the healing and attack boost every now and then. But they managed to kill him, his loot and relic had been obtained, and after his body vanished, we made it back home. On day 64, I did something I should have done way earlier. I named each of the army bunyips after a random kind person from my last 100 days video comments section. They just chilled at the shores and I made some more beer jars to hopefully tame a high-level female Dinotherium, mainly for one simple reason. The males give attack boost, the females a defense boost. We flew all over the land to look for one, and even in Vanaheim, where nothing was found, so we headed to Asgard again. After a few minutes, we did find this lovely lady. Sorry love, you gotta be single again. I lured her down here and got out of render distance. Back at the lady, I started to buy her a couple drinks to lighten the mood. Well, she took the first and second, but the third she was a bit grumpy, so I left her alone for a while. But still tamed her up a bit later on. Now all I had to do was build another little breeding corner on my island. On day 65 we went over to Asgard again to challenge Hati and Skull, the mighty wolf duo of the sun and moon. Their terminal was a lot easier to find, to be honest. I cleared out the area a bit and once again threw out all my bunyips around the summoning terminal. And once the canines had been summoned, I headed to the sky where I held my Daedon in order to heal my fighters. But since we already killed Steinbjorn, this fight was too easy. Hardy and Skull simply disappeared between these tubs of lard. Skull was the first who fell. This whole fight was rather bland. Again, it was over in like 5 minutes or so. But at last, we got the relics we needed. Besides this rather boring fight, I didn't do much. I checked the breeders for no promising results, gathered berries, and finally placed some torches in my house. I wanted and or needed to get the last remaining artifacts. So in the early morning, we kinda just glided alongside this whole tundra area until we finally found the cave entrance. And after a very rude welcoming, we went inside the cave. Polovias couldn't really do much against us and simply stormed away through the opposition. Wolves, yetis, and bears stood no chance against Behemoth's sheer strength. After we disposed this little area, we had to squeeze through this narrow tunnel with Shere Khan, but there were no creatures on the other side, so I did some grapple action and simply hovered over the death gaps, shot the enemies so they would come closer and die. And after dealing with some Polovias, I managed to grab the artifact. All the loot and waited a bit in the hopes new crates would spawn, but that took too long, so we headed back outside. Once we made our way home, I organized some of the things we got and placed the Scarlet artifact. Seagulls had been dealt with, crops collected, and some grapples were made as well. And I went on my way to do another cave. The small lava cave where I kinda skipped this jump and jack section and used Velvet's flight to deal with some cave inhabitants, as well as grabbing this very nice loot. But at one point I did swap over to Shere Khan and we clawed away to the artifact of the pack. Maybe I'm alone on this topic here, but I love cave runs. They are so much fun. Also, a bit further down, there was another artifact. So once again, we had to fight our way to it as well. And with some jumps, we got the artifact of the Clever. I did jump back on Velvet in order to get this drop, and we got back home. I finally got 2 good stat baby elephants. In case you're wondering how I handle my breedings, it's pretty simple. I usually let my creatures breed when I'm either asleep or at work. We got back to the sea and I kinda got distracted by this Aklut, but I wasn't sure if I should tame it or not. Anyway, we were back at this underwater grotto cave, and this time I did proceed to go further down, killed a bunch of high level insects, and after that I made my way down on foot, avoided some possible traps, and reached this gorgeous artifact room. I did notice that my greenhouse was a bit empty and the baby dinotherms were in dire need of food. So Fred and I went to the mainland and gathered all the needed berries, as well as seeds. Turns out these bushes here are really good for that. Towards the end of the day, the dinotherms were fully matured, so you know what that means. Healing. Yep, healing. Always heal anything. Also, to be safe, I did provide the terminals with more balls and then headed out to get more crystal. Whilst doing so, I got a surprise hug from my favorite creature in all of ARK. So I wanted to thank him. Anyway, I also cleared out this whole cliffside because I like harvesting metal, grabbed another heart and fought this Alpha Rex who managed to enrage Behemoth. Well, bunyips rage grants at infinite stamina, so get slapped, dude. Without hesitation, we headed straight for the last artifact cave, swam through this tunnel, and once surfaced, I had to do some grappling parkour action, reached the upper level, and threw out Shere Khan, but got knocked out by these Titanoboas. Luckily, my tiger lured them all down, but I could still hear some. Plus, my torpor just wouldn't drop, and I was worried something would happen to my otter, who also fell down the hole. But I woke up to ash and dust, turned these snakes into dust, and got back down to pick up my tames. And then used Behemoth to walk further inside. In the main hall room, however, I found this nightmarish high-level fire spitter. Luckily, he ignored me. On the other side, there was this narrow pathway, which I had to walk on foot, and had to avoid nasty traps in this maze. And since I have the orientation of a potato, I decided to watch a very useful guide from my buddy Ninja Killer. I used his artifact guide in order to find all artifact caves. Carefully make my way forward over spikes, traps, and deadly pressure plates until I reached this small room where I had to type in a button combination. It was green, yellow, purple, and blue. The door opened and I kept on going through small hallways and over death pits. And shortly after, another button game showed up. This time it was green, purple, yellow, blue. Another door opened and I kept on moving until I reached the artifact. Pushed another button and after some back and forth, we made it back to the main hall and I got out of the cave. I had all 10 artifacts which I needed to summon the Guardians. A third damage mutation on the bunyips had been reached, and whilst she grew up a bit, Behemoth and I went to the mainland to go on a little meat run as well as gathering some berries. But yeah, kinda just ran all over the land and killed and collected. The damage mutated bunny was fully grown, but I was hoping to get a third health mutation as well, so I let the other continue to breed. Oh, and I found this small cave near my island actually, with some friendly fellas inside. Once dealt with, I found a summoning terminal. Neat that 2 boss terminals are this close to my base. Oh, and lastly, I killed this alpha megalodon and he gave me an ascendant crossbow. I simply grabbed a random good stat elephant and named him Kronos. I came across this abysmal red drop.
Yeah? What the hell is this?
And decided to steal some more of the items from the friendly beavers. Now, I had no idea you could open these big dams, but only if you crawl inside them. By the way, some allos kinda killed all the beavers, so I hope that won't cause me any problems for future paste heists. Anyway, I imprinted Kronos and healed him up a little bit, and later on, Lilith and I decimated the local penguin population once more. And around the evening, I killed the Sudi because his lungs were the only boss tribute I didn't had yet, and Kronos was fully grown. I was pretty certain we couldn't get Dinotherium mutations and get them already in time, so I simply raised 3 females, which were named Defense 1, 2 and 3. And there was no sign of any damage mutations on the bunyips, so I shifted the breeders in order to combine the 2 HP and 3 damage mutations. I was then in the search for mantis. I found some, killed to find out if Lilith can gather a bunch of polymer from them, but sadly she couldn't. So I went on a lovely little berry run because my babies were hungry. I finally put the breeder Daedons away and upgraded John's saddle a little bit. I healed up the baby elephants as well and went into the sea for some very obvious reasons, as well as collecting even more berries. Oh, and the female Dinotheriums fully matured. The next day, Kronos and I had some fun leveling up. He simply stomped pretty much everything into the ground, mainly carnivores since they deal more damage towards them. Now, he isn't nearly as strong as my bunyips, but that's okay. Later on, the Dinotheriums will simply be there for support anyway. Since I can't tame Uties, they were the second best option. After leveling him up a bit, I went back home to level him even further using some of his siblings, but 10 of them only gave him 4 levels. That kinda shocked me, so I used bunyips as well, and after I was somewhat satisfied with stats, I started to level up the females as well, or one of them at least. A perfect male bunyip was born in the early hours of day 75. Whilst he was chilling, I used a bunch of his siblings to level up the remaining Dinotheriums halfway through this day. Perfect murder seal could finally produce some offspring, and I gripped the Dinotherium saddles and upgraded them a little bit. During this process, however, I did run really low on certain resources, mainly fibers, so I gathered a bunch and finished upgrading the saddles, made some paste and collected stone to craft even more. I finished this stone grind in the early morning, but also paid the beavers a visit. I then needed metals, so I headed over to another rich metal spot. Once back home, I took a look at the other bunyips I used to fight the mini-bosses, and they all had a bunch of levels. Of course, as any good ARK survivor would do, I contributed these levels. And raised some perfect baby bunyips, which once again were all named after some of you amazing peeps. But I had to terrorize the sea once more to keep these fellas fed. After a little flesh rush, put the new bunyips away in a terminal and started to upgrade some of the other bunyip saddles. This took a lot of time, but mainly materials. My boxes haven't been this spare in quite some time, so I gathered the things I needed. Fiber, again, mainly that. Oh, and tons of metal, of course. Anywho, some sweet veggie cakes had been cooked, stone collected, food made, and bunyips setting adjusted and copied. Primarily the victim item collection had been turned off. Once all that was settled, I grabbed the needed apex drops and the 3 artifacts. We then flew over to the small cave we saw a little bit ago and cleared it out. I released all my Dinotheriums and my Daedon. Not the bunyips though, because they are technically a bit too big, but nothing the Sober mod can't fix. But I'm getting distracted. I placed all the attributes, activated the terminal, and we slowly entered the arena of the Broodmother, the queen of all spiders. As soon as we were there, she rushed towards me, so I had to act quickly. At first, only 2 of my seals could be released. I jumped on Kronos to boost them, and then threw out the rest of my monsters. The Dinotheriums charged in as well and releasing bellowing roars to boost their allies. Meanwhile, I just ran around the fight and threw out more and more bunyips. I healed as well, but they all did a phenomenal job, simply surrounding the Broodmother and stomping the crap out of her. I couldn't even see her most of the fight, and after only some damage taken, she was down. So I grabbed her loot, picked up my bunyips, and got teleported out of the arena. Once out, we went back home. Now, funny enough, I originally wanted to use Atlas Kodiaks, but well, if you can't find any good ones... Anyway, the spider flag was placed at my base as the sun settled. Let's see, on this lovely day, I did something amazing. I looked all over the island to find theries and uties for the claws and lungs I needed. I did found and got all the theries, but the uties, not so much. So I kinda just stopped looking for them and headed back home to make veggie cakes. After some more grinding, I picked up some Apex Drops artifacts and, well, we headed over to the Aberration Cave. There I had to get rid of the scrap and settled up my elephants and piggy. After everything was arranged, we teleported into the Megapithecus boss arena, the legendary simian of the Arks. His arena was a lot better because I could just casually walk over to him, and whilst he was looking at me, some released bunyips already charged at him. I threw out even more and more. Note to myself though, don't leave your healing mount on neutral. He charged in head first. Whilst not all my bunyips were released, they still did a number on him. And after struggling to get up this cliff, I jumped on a random bunyip and simply joined the gang violence. The monkey fell after like 4 minutes. I took his stuff and looked upon my critters. Some of them barely took any damage, to be honest. Funny though how the bunyips can't enter but exit boss arenas. But after I picked up all my creatures, I headed back home slowly and relaxed, but also a bit worried, since the next guardian won't be this funny. The monkey flag had been placed at my house and I leveled up all the battle mounts, since they all received a good amount of XP during the boss fights. And I also gave the mutation bunyip some levels for the sake of it. And upgraded the saddles too. Besides some meat runs, not much happened on this day. I spent the entirety of day 82 gathering huge amounts of stone as well as metal, and managed to get it all back home thanks to the strength of Behemoth. On day 83 I needed more UD lungs in order to fight the third guardian. I found the UDs and they kindly donated their lungs to me. And besides that, not much happened. I did a small metal run and cooked some helpful soups. I still prepared myself for the boss fight. I crafted ammo and grabbed some of the better non-fur gear I had collected, as well as putting some cool Viking skins over the armor and finally painting said armor in my colors. This looks way better already. Day 85, it was time we challenged the third and final guardian. So I grabbed the needed items and did my usual preparations once we were at the terminal, which is located in the large mine we explored way earlier. I activated the teleport and we were about to enter the arena of the most dangerous guardian. Once in, the dragon flew high above us, so I used this moment to throw out some of my bunyips. The dragon had other plans though, so he rained some balls of fire down upon my creatures. They rushed at him once he landed to repay the nasty welcoming. I mounted the elephants and released the buff roars, but John had another idea. Yep, he wasn't on passive, so I rushed in. I mounted a random bunyip and shot at the boss. But then our first bunyip fell already, and John as well. More and more bunyips fell to the winged menace. I couldn't do much but shoot. On half health, he took to the skies to call his minions. One of the Dinotheriums died as well. I whistled my creatures around so that they could avoid the dragon's flaming projectiles. He landed again and my fighters rushed to him. I as well joined this fight, but sadly more and more of my creatures fell, and within a couple of minutes I was almost alone. Only 3 other bunyips survived. So I shot the dragon out of despair, dodging his flames and kept my shotgun pointed at him. He landed a third time and we tried our best to hold our ground. Whenever my bunyip would run out of stamina, I would shoot the boss. She enraged though, so I could simply spam her most heavy-hitting attacks, and despite all the odds, still came out on top. I knew we'd suffer casualties, but not such severe ones. I tried to pick up as many saddles as I could before getting teleported out. Once outside, we flew back home. But there was little time to waste, so I mourned Behemoth's death as I placed a gravestone. I was hoping he would stay with me till the very end. I immediately raised more bunyips for the final and last fight, as well as a Daedon which I named Martha. Throughout this day, I gathered needed resources and waited for more baby bunyips to mature, and got a new squadron of Dinotheriums. The male was named Gamudo. And well, for the rest of this time, I repeated the same over and over again. Raising babies, leveling them up, renaming them, upgrading the saddles, harvesting the needed materials for said saddles, etc. So I don't want to bore you here. Day 99, I did some last preparations, such as making some cakes and crafting ammo, as well as taking a look around my base and thanking each of my critters. Moxie for his harvesting services, the unnamed Andrew for being a good early mount, Velvet for a flight, Shere Khan for being a good cave mount, Fred for the wood, Gerald for helping me gathering lots of berries early on, and of course my boy Behemoth behemoth. Man, how I'd wished you'd stayed. Besides that, I flew over the land and waited for the night to fall upon us. It was finally here, day 100, the very end of this adventure. I repaired some of my gear in the early morning, picked up the 3 boss trophies, and made my way to the green obelisk. Mainly because it was the closest one, and it was also secluded. Once there, I threw out my support mounts and adjusted some of their settings. Gave the Dinotherium some cakes, laced the trophies inside the terminal, and activated it. There was no going back now. All of this led up to this very moment, to fight the monstrous wolf, feared by the gods themselves, Fenrir. We entered the arena and the wolf was off in the distance, so I used this opportunity to throw out some of my bunyips. I buffed them as Fenrir summoned massive ice spikes upon my fighters. They proceeded to run towards him to engage combat. And as they fought this fearsome canine, me and my supporters kept our distance and I threw out even more bunyips. Whilst they dug their tusks into his fur, I had to fend off the smaller Fenrir who were called by the boss. But more were on the way, so I threw out more of my own critters as well. Jumped on one of the female elephants to boost the defense. Whilst we were in the midst of combat, Martha died. Honestly, at this point it's just a trend that I leave my Daedons on neutral. Anyway, the bunyips did a phenomenal job against Fenrir. He did do some good damage towards them, but not as insane as the dragon. And after more bites and stomps, the wolf died. I placed his flag on top of my house later on. And with this, we've done it. We've beaten Fjordur. I want to thank everyone who watched this video. Thank you for joining me on this Nordic journey. I hope you liked it, and if you did, consider to like and subscribe. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you guys in my next adventure. Goodbye.